reviews, but somehow it came out. And what we did is every article we looked at, we developed 5x8 cards, and then I shuffled them and I indexed them and I moved them back and forth until something made sense to me, and that organized it. And that's where we began. And so anytime I've moved on to another area of research, and you're going to say, yeah, it's always in pricing, but it's never quite that. So when we started when we did the several studies on comparative price advertising, we realized the whole area of price perceived quality in our minds had not been done correctly. And there's over 20 articles out there that we pulled together. So we came up with a different conceptual framework. And then the review piece was published in a book that Jack Jacoby and Jerry Olson put out. That led to a whole new domain, and that led me to a whole new stream of research. And I'd always, from the time of my dissertation, have been interested in things what today we call numerical cognition. And so Angela Lee and I did a review which came out in GEMS in 1999. And that's led to some more research. And Dave Stewart gave me, as an editor, when we submitted to JM, our first attempt to do a review on price and on perceptions of unfairness of price. And it wasn't done well that first time in, but he gave us the opportunity to revise it. And then, of course, he left because his tour was over, but Ruth Bolton came in and she worked with us until we got it done, and that was published. And there's been a lot of papers since that have come out in this area of perceived. But all of these works began with reviewing and finding a way to synthesize where we were. And so I think this is important, and we need that to help us identify. And one of the key things I think that is important here when we do a review, does it show up? Yeah, there it is. We need to isolate sources of variation across studies. We need to find out why they're different, why the results make sense in one place but not in another. Is it a conceptual thing? Is it a methodological thing? Whatever. So we have to identify issues of substantive knowledge and methodology, and also the conceptual and theoretical relationships that go on in there. And so what are the consequences of if we don't have good knowledge accumulation? Well, we get reviews that are not informative. That's one thing. We get the scope and boundaries of relationships are ill-defined. We don't know where this phenomenon will operate, where it won't operate, what it explains, what it doesn't explain. We end up, and this is one of the biggest faults in the marketing area, we have a plethora of small sample size studies. 20 subjects, participants, 30, 40, 50. They're all small. 7 years ago, when David Mick was the editor of the Journal of Consumer Research, he came to me, because he knew I'd been, of course, the editor earlier, and I had written a couple of editorials on replication. We need more and more to build up a sample size. And David wanted to start this section, which basically was a replication section of JCR. And I suggested he go and ask Jack Hunter, who then was at Michigan State, to do an article of why we need to do integrative reviews. And Jack agreed. And he pointed out that anything less than 4,000 is a small sample size study. Now think about that. We're happy if we get 30 or 40. That's small. But you know the other side of that, if you have 4,000 and you're using the t-test or some other test with statistics, everything's going to be statistically significant. So really, it's not the point of getting statistical significance. And you see people also, as I get on my bandwagon now, but if it's p equals 0.06, it's no effect. That's wrong. There is an effect there. Just add a few more n's and you get it. Okay? But anyway, so the summary, and that means summary effect size of relationships are unknown. We really don't know the strength of any of these relationships that are out there. And so if we're able to accumulate knowledge, then we begin to see whether or not we have consistency of results. We can determine the sources of variation across studies. We establish the boundaries of knowledge, what we know, what we don't know, where it applies, where it doesn't apply. and it gives us a chance to validate theories. That's something I haven't really heard today, the issue of validation. I've heard about conceptualizing and developing theories, but do we validate theories? And that is why I talk about the boundaries of knowledge. At some point, the theory won't apply. We need to know that. All right. Now, my second passion is at the doctoral education. When we were, as Manjeet mentioned, and incidentally Bill Wilkie was on this task force with me on the development of marketing thought. Actually, we were supposed to talk about not the development of marketing thought, but also how it should be disseminated. And just when we get into that, AMA disbanded us after 4 years of work on it. But anyway, so one of the things we talked about, we put a lot of effort in that particular task force about doctoral education. And so we came up with 4 goals, if you wish, or objectives. One is we need to help the students learn to develop conceptualized and conceptual skills. They need to be able to think abstractly, to think from a lot of them are able to think from a single case or small example, but how do you pull back from that and get abstracting and get away from the specifics of that? They need to also simply apply and acquire a substantive knowledge and the ability to use that knowledge. They need to develop operational skills. And they need to develop multiple research methods. I think everybody needs to become a multi-method person. Right now, in a good part of marketing, we are either developing people who are good at modeling and good at doing experiments. That's it. And each of these methods have limitations. We need to now get other data from other ways of collecting data. And then we need to help our people develop communication skills, both written and oral, and have them do presentations, have them write research papers, have them teach. But this is an example of why we need to do this. And I think as I've read different editorials of different editors as they leave the journal, their stint is over, and they sit back and they reflect, and one of the things almost they always reflect on how badly writing is. Okay. Now, a number of years ago, a group of psychologists prevailed upon the American Psychological Association to allow them to go into some of the APA journals and read and document the reasons why papers were rejected. This is a summary table from all of that. There are 6 journals they were given permission to go into the files. And these remarks were based upon 3,477 coded weaknesses of the manuscripts that had been rejected by these different psychological journals. And the thing that I want to point out to you is this. 2/3 of the weaknesses detected were in presentation, writing, and format. Also, look at issues of design, procedures, measurement, analysis in terms of execution. Just under 20%. Where do we put our emphasis in the doctoral training? They don't have a lot of weakness there, but we don't help them learn how to communicate and how to write and how to pull it together. A number of years ago in the Psychological Review, the psychologist and statistician Kronbach was asked to write some reflections on his career. And he said, you know, this goes back now, before we had the computers and then we did all the cut and paste on the computers. You had to do it by giving notes to the secretaries to retype and type and type again. And he said, they used to hate me. because I would give him manuscript after the same manuscript back again and again and again with different colored pens, pencils, and turns and arrows and so on. He wrote and he wrote and he rewrote until he got it right. Now I know a lot of people who draft it and send it out. We've got to train our people to do a lot better than this. But the point here is 2/3 of the weaknesses were not whoops, I did the wrong one here. Let's go back. 2/3, come on, you got to learn how to do this right. There we go. Get the right key. There we go. 2/3 are in presentation. And the last thing I want to talk about very briefly is mentoring students. As I mentioned at the beginning, don't commit the sins that that were put on you. And each student, and this is very important, each student you get is unique. Each student has a different set of skills, a different set of abilities, a different personality. Each student is fragile in certain ways. Each student is strong in certain ways. And they're all different. And you have to learn how to work with each of them and develop a different approach for each of them. So in these bullets here, I actually sat back and said, well, what are some of the students I had? And no, Manjit, you're not necessarily listed here. But I've had the students who are very creative and very highly motivated. Didn't have to spend a lot of time just kind of nudging them along the way. Others that are very successful, extremely bright people, but you had to hold their hands all the way through it because they had no confidence. Why? Someplace in their background, they just lost that ability to feel confident about themselves. Okay. I had one of the students I worked with at her undergraduate level. She graduated cum laude. And I said, I was trying to be good to her, and I said, how'd you happen to get that? She says, oh, I got to be someplace. She focused on the weakness, not on her strength. And so that's something I had to work on and help her train that. I've had students who are high achievement oriented but not creative. So you got to help them learn how to pull things together. They can do the work, but they can't think through beyond that. Very capable, but you got to be on them all the time. So that means come see me every week and spend time with them. Some students take criticism very well, some don't. So you have to understand that you can't always use the same technique with every student. I've been blessed with a way of understanding when I've pushed to the limit of the student. And I've had a student say, how do you know this? I said, I don't know how I know when to stop. That's all there is to it. But you have to learn to push the students to the point where you've got their ability maximized and then do that. But these are different students, and the point I want to say, each student is different.